After all the hype and a budget reportedly in excess of $40 million, Batman finally got off the ground last night, and the excess continued as a crush of fans and lines of stars were on hand for a Gotham-sized premiere.
Batman. The serial. Nintendo. Batman.
1-800-BATMAN. Batmania is already out of control. It's estimated Warner Brothers stands to make $250 million, not on the movie, but on the merchandising alone. More news later.
In 1989, Warner Brothers released Tim Burton's Batman, based on the Caped Crusader who began appearing in Detective Comics as early as 1939. And while DC and WB were in post-production, Universal was in pre-production.
Universal Studios, Florida. Premiering in Orlando, spring 1990.
Its first theme park was being built in Florida, featuring some concepts from its tram tour in Hollywood. Along the way, the park ran into a few problems which stalled the project several times, eventually leading to it being beaten out by another Orlando-based movie theme park in 1989.
Disney MGM Studios theme park at Walt Disney World in Florida.
This left Universal to push themselves even harder to meet their 1990 start date, and by June 7th, the park was open for business.
The only place on Earth where you can ride the movies.
As the gates opened, guests and celebrities alike flocked to this movie mecca.
Conducting the ribbon-cutting ceremony were Jay Stein and Steven Spielberg.
No amount of celebrity or goodwill could save how disastrous this opening was. Multiple rides failed to function and the park was in major need of more development time. But Universal was dead set on becoming a strong competitor with the Disney parks. They gave every guest who visited in the summer an additional day pass, and also extended all seasonal passes an additional 6 months. By 1991, Universal had worked out the kinks in its initial attractions and a positive perception of the park began to rise. That year, they also premiered Back to the Future: The Ride, which was met with tremendous success, only to be paralleled 5 months later with a new holiday tradition.
Fright Nights, a 3-night event where guests were thrown headfirst into a nightmarish environment.
Fright Night eventually became Halloween Horror Nights, which to this day is one of Universal's most profitable ventures. With the park coming into its own, Universal wanted to develop it into a multi-day resort destination. So in the early 90s, plans began to take shape for Project X, a second theme park which would be located right next to Universal. Initial concepts for the park were called Cartoon World. It would have operated like the Magic Kingdom with a central hub and different lands surrounding it. These areas would have included a Dr. Seuss-themed land, a comic strip land featuring Dudley Do-Right, a Popeye Doc area, and a Looney Tune land.
Around the time of Project X's development, Warner Brothers was gearing up to release the sequel to its smash hit. Batman Returns was scheduled to premiere June 16, 1992, and after the $411 million box office of its first film, Universal began to develop their version of The Dark Knight. The company developed this within a blue sky period, a pre-production aspect of a project where any idea and premise is entertained. For that reason, the concepts for what follows are the most technologically advanced and groundbreaking realism ever attempted in a theme park. It went through many iterations and titles changed constantly, but the island, the area, the land, was Gotham City.
As you entered the city, you were surrounded by giant statues of Batman's Rogues Gallery. This was nothing compared to the main entrance, a staggering 5-story tall statue of the Dark Knight himself.
Once you walked under the Caped Crusader's crotch, you were taken away into the seedy streets and dark alleys of Gotham City. The neo-noir design resembled that of Anton Furst's set design for the '89 film, although some concepts allow you to enter on a second side with a sunnier 30s Art Deco theme representing that of Metropolis. Within this city lay a comic book fantasy with rides, shows, and more restaurants and stores than they knew what to do with.
There was Joker's Diner, a fast food restaurant with a circus atmosphere, with each meal served in a Jack-in-the-Box take-home container. There was Penguin Pizza near the water, a seedy dive bar with pool tables where each waiter dressed in a tuxedo and served pizza in Italian-style dishes. The Penguin was going to make appearances at the restaurant. There was Lex Luthor's Villains Club, a high-class dinner establishment where guests would have the chance to dine next to the most notorious villains in DC history on a daily basis. The Krypton Club, an all-green space-age restaurant reminiscent of Superman's home planet. And there was also Lois Lane's Metropolis Diner, the Daily Planet Press Club, Smallville Soda Shop, and Kent's Candies. The myriad of store concepts began with Brainiac's Bookstore, a book and comic book shop fashioned after a retro 30s spaceship. Dark Knight's Gifts would have been a cathedral-like building with stone carvings selling every and all Batman merchandise. And Catwoman's Lair, a retail store with panther statues outside with gold trimming. The store was meant to carry feminine items like handbags, cigarette cases, high-fashion hats, shoes, day planners, and more. These are just brief descriptions from a long list of ideas the creative team developed. But then, there was the Batcave.
Who is it this time, Commissioner? Joker, Egghead, Riddler, King Tut?
It was a nightclub somewhat modeled after Disneyland's teen venue Videopolis, where people could just come hang out and dance. Guests would enter Bruce Wayne's library where they could have a drink and relax. Once enough guests entered, the doors would close and the lights would dim just as the bat signal would appear in the sky. A large picture would open revealing a sci-fi type elevator that would be ready to take guests down to the Batcave. Described as a state-of-the-art club with giant TV screens surrounding you with lasers, fog rolling in on the dance floor, water flowing into the grotto, all equipped with special audio and visual effects, as well as a circular bar in the center with drinks served in test tubes and beakers. There was a midway called Superhero Stadium. It was modeled after the Hall of Justice and featured different style carnival games for each DC superhero, even including a Zatanna magic booth and an Aquaman whack-a-mole. But the piece of resistance for the team was the Justice League Mind Warp, a VR tech helmet simulator and dark ride where the heroes must unite to defeat Brainiac. The main goal was for the ride to push the limits of human perception at a theme park, adding in things like smell and newly formed visual techniques. The designers even went so far as to contact Dr. Hugh Greer at the Santa Barbara Medical Foundation's Clinic Department of Neurology, who wrote back that they were on the right track. There was also Joker's House of Mirrors, a walkthrough attraction combining the classic Carnival House of Mirrors with new theme park visuals, also requiring blasts from jet turbines. They had designed the Joker's Funhouse, a traditional wild mouse coaster only modeled after Joker's headquarters in Alan Moore's comic Batman the Killing Joke. There was a 4D show which would have combined FX from Siegfried and Roy and other magic acts, placing the guest in Gotham Opera House, where Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, and Commissioner Gordon spoke to the crowd, all before a telephone booth descends from the ceiling and the Joker crashes the party. The ride would have been similar to Terminator 2 3D Battle Across Time, where live actors would have interacted with a 3D film, all while guests were strapped in and moving about in their stationary vehicles, similar to the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera. They went through several titles including The Super Friends and The Theater of Death, Batman's Super Crime Time Theater, and The Amazing Opera of Crime, eventually landing on Terrible Traps and Fantastic Escapes. There was a Batcar Dark ride in which it was never referred to as the Batmobile. This centered around events in the 1989 movie. Eventually, this evolved into a Batwing simulator ride called Race with the Joker, which would have been similar to Star Tours. Guests would have to fight Catwoman in order to get to the Joker in his large hot air balloon from where he was trying to take control of the city. After fighting head-to-head, the Batwing would take him out, saving Gotham. Another version of this became a Batwing coaster, where guests would glide through show buildings and even some going through parts of the park. This was called Joker's Wild. In most iterations, guests would enter through a queue in Wayne Manor. Another version of this involved the Joker gassing guests where they would wake up in a new world. This was called Welcome to Jokerland. All of this began to transform into one ride, the Batwing. It would have been the first steel dueling coaster traveling through at least 3 separate show buildings. When you entered the ride, you had to pick a side, Batman or the Penguin, with each one leading to separate queues, one with the Batcave and one traveling into the sewers of Gotham. Depending on which one you chose, you either traveled in the Batwing or the newly fashioned Penguin Fighter. Each of these vehicles were equipped with guns which allowed the guests to not only battle with each other, but to apparently interact with larger sets and props throughout the ride. Both coasters would speed past each other, narrowly missing, allowing each team to rack up points with their guns. As they whizzed by in this high-speed chase to the finish, they entered a blacklit Riddler room where they could shoot down giant question marks. In the end, a winner would come out ahead and score and in the race for Gotham. The only ride centered around the Man of Steel was Superman 3D. Guests would have entered the Daily Planet and walked through the halls as they watched footage of Planet News Network. As they entered the pre-show, Perry White, the editor-in-chief of the Planet, would tell them PNN was now offering night tours of Metropolis. Guests would then board their telecopter, putting on their 3D glasses and soaring above the city. In the air, they would be introduced to their pilot, and Jimmy Olsen. Once they toured the city, Superman would come in and greet you, until he was interrupted by another PNN telecopter, notifying you of some commotion. Superman would then race off and you would follow. Perry White would come on the telecopter screen letting you know Lex Luthor has escaped from prison and has taken over an oil refinery, where he's trapped the first reporter on the scene. Lois Lane is surrounded by flames until Superman soars in and saves her. Now Lex has begun to terrorize the city in his own flying contraption. He attacked your telecopter, making your ride vehicle freefall a reported 130 feet, just before Superman flies in and saves the day. Then there was something that seemed to receive the most focus. It was a night show developed for the large lagoon around Gotham City, and it was called the Batman and Robin Action Adventure Spectacular. Billed as the biggest show in the world, nothing less will do. Batman and Robin are pitted against their greatest villains in a non-stop action show that takes place on land, sea, and air. The Joker, the Penguin, and Catwoman plan to hold Gotham City hostage by stealing a nuclear missile.
Holy, unholy alliance! Our greatest foes have reunited!
Some versions of it have multiple shows with 3,000 guests, while others have an outstanding section which includes enough seating for anywhere from 10 to 20,000 guests. The buildings of Gotham lay in the background as Commissioner Gordon comes on a screen urging everyone to exit Gotham as the Joker is threatened to blow up the city. Just then, in the lagoon, Axis Chemical Plant is attacked by the Joker in a gunship. The bat signal shines and the Dark Knight appears. A Batmobile chase ensues around the perimeter, featuring stunts and special effects. Robin shows up, but the Joker's helicopter arrives in time for him to take the clown away. Later, in the Batcave, the Joker, Catwoman, and the Penguin take over the computer screen and announce they have taken over the city. The dynamic duo tries to trace their location, tracking both villains individually. They go up against the Penguin and Catwoman on two separate islands simultaneously, each shifting focus, eventually ending with Batman on his Bat Racer zooming by the Penguin and blowing up his racing boats. Now, the Axis Chemical Plant is turned into the Joker's hideout, where he reveals the missile he's about to launch. Batman and Robin infiltrate the base using the Batmarine, a submarine heading towards Axis. The Joker's defense system is illuminated, and his base rises up in the air. Robin jumps aboard while Batman gets the Batcopter, which he uses to board the base in the sky. Robin is busy dealing with the Penguin and Catwoman again, while Batman and the Joker square off as the seconds count down on the missile. Just as Batman takes out the Joker, he's able to send the bomb into the lagoon, exploding water all over the crowd. The two of them let everyone know the city is now safe, and Commissioner Gordon reappears to tell them the Joker's on his way to Arkham Asylum. The Goddard Group, who was in charge of designing the park, negotiated with Time Warner, who asked for 10% of all merchandise and sales related to their properties. Universal countered with 6%, and eventually Time Warner agreed to 8%. Universal told them they didn't need their characters, and it was over. The designers tried to salvage Cartoon World by using properties they already owned, like Hanna-Barbera, Peanuts, and The Simpsons.
Well, at least it's safer than the old bus.
This was put to an end in 1993 when Jurassic Park was released.
Good evening. More on those stories in a moment. First, the hottest ticket in the Bay Area, Jurassic Park, has arrived. From the looks of it, you'll be lucky to get in to see it this weekend.
It went on to be one of Universal's biggest box office hits, with focus for the park shifting back a few million years.
After years of meetings, drawings, meetings, models, meetings, studio prep, and meetings, ground was finally broken on the Jurassic Park River Adventure on January 1st, 1995.
But something bigger was coming. Islands of Adventure opened on May 28, 1999, and in order for the park not to contain too many cartoon islands, an area called the Lost Continent was developed, which focused on old lore and tall tales. It featured a steel racing coaster called Dueling Dragons, which had some similarities to the Batwing coaster. But the biggest change came when Universal secured the theme park rights to Marvel Comics. Large sections of Superman 3D were recycled to make Islands of Adventure's greatest attraction, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. Instead of the Daily Planet, you entered the Daily Bugle. The helicopter resembled the Scoop, and instead of Perry White, it was J. Jonah Jameson, and the freefall drop was changed to a simulated one. Islands of Adventure went on to feature previously thought-out areas and attractions like Seuss Landing, a Dr. Seuss-themed area, Toon Lagoon, a comic strip section, which featured a Popeye raft ride called Bluto's Bilge Rat Barges, and Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls. In the end, Universal got its multi-day resort, and Batman got his ride too. In 1990, Time Warner invested a 19% stake in the Six Flags theme parks, which in 1992, after the Universal deal fell through, increased to 50%. And by 1993, they had taken control of the entire parks, which they held for 5 years. In 1992, Batman the Ride was introduced to Six Flags Great America. It has since been cloned for 6 other Six Flags parks. And while they've gone on to feature other DC attractions, a fully immersive version of Gotham will probably never be realized. I guess that's what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.